and I'm so excited to be here. I love having the opportunity to spend some time with you, and I'm glad to share some things that I do in my business that might be applicable to what you guys do. So the first thing I want to say to you is don't assume that what I'm talking about is just for a bigger business. If you're an individual, feel free to pop up and say, how can I use that as a smaller person who only wants to bring on 5 clients this year? So let's try to make this really work for you, because I want you to stay engaged, because the things I'm going to talk about can be scaled. I might talk about them at a little bit bigger company level. When I start doing that, just say, stop, tell me how I can do it if I'm only this big. Okay, so I want this to be useful to everybody. I am here because I believe in these 3 traits of the Good Human Growth Network. Totally believe this. Catherine and I've talked about this for years. We're trying to develop our businesses. We're trying to expand our relationships, and we're trying to grow as humans. And I love the fact that everybody that comes on this channel to speak is really looking at those 3 things. I want to be a better human now than I was last year. I want to have more relationships. I want to get to know all of you and what your businesses are doing. I really want to get to know you. I've spent some time with Ben. I've spent some time with Clint. And for those of you who may be outside my peripheral virtual vision, I may have spent some time with you, but I loved that time because I want to know who I could introduce you to. I want to know when I hear something or I read a book, I want to be able to share that with you. So I love the trinity of these concepts that keep all of us together. So if there are some of you that weren't on last week, what I want to share with you is a little bit about who I am. I started out as a software engineer with the Department of Agriculture in Kansas City. And I did that for several years, and I moved to Houston, and I became a software engineer. I worked for oil and gas companies. I worked for NASA. The nerdier it got, the better I liked it. And as I moved on through life, I became a consultant to companies, particularly in oil and gas, or I would run test scenarios for NASA, but because they just need a snippet of work. They didn't need me full time. And the thing that's most important to all of you, everybody always asks, how did you meet Catherine Brown? And I met Catherine Brown in 1996. She and I were both working for a company that was then Ramos and Associates. It became Cambridge Technology Partners and then Novell. But Catherine and I met at that small company. I was employee number 32, and I think she was employee like number 38. And she was in charge of recruiting, and I was in charge of selling software implementations. And we got to be really dear friends because we knew that we were like 2 spigots on your bathroom sink. And if I sold too much and she didn't have the people to staff it, I would scald the organization. And if she sold more, or she recruited more people and hired them than I sold business, we would freeze the organization. So we have spent a lot of years learning to adjust the dials about how we work together. So I went from there into software implementation sales, and I've been cold calling and appointment setting since 2008. What I'm sharing with you is not just about cold calling, and it's not just about setting appointments. What we're really looking at are the tenets of an effective sales campaign. And it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are, you need pieces of all of these tenets that you see on the screen. And last week I started talking about the right target. We're going to finish that. And then I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about planned sales choreography. And then next week I'm going to talk about prepared objection handling, because everybody in this room can use that. We all get objections. We all get turned down. So I'm going to go ahead and start in finishing up the right target. Then the first thing that we do when we're developing a sales campaign is we want that strategically curated calling list. And last week, you guys brainstormed with me about how do we build that? How do we build a list that tells us we've got the right people, the right kind of companies, the right number of prospects, the right kind of combination of contact information. And so when we brainstormed, we said, what makes a lead right? And in this group, we said, sometimes it's industry. Sometimes it's not industry, it's just a department. Like maybe it's HR in any industry, or maybe it's a title. Maybe I always want to talk to the CFO, or maybe I always want to talk to the controller. And then we talked about in that list, we also have to have a certain amount of room to move around. And by room to move around it, I introduced the concept of triangulation. So when I set up a list for a caller to call or for an email campaign, I'm literally saying, I don't want one person to shut me down. So I want to triangulate. So if I want to talk to the VP of sales, I might be looking for the VP of sales. I might be looking for the sales managers under them, and I might be looking for whoever his gatekeeper is. So I might, for that one target company, I might have 3 people that I'm talking to. So that's what we talked about triangulation last week. Sometimes when we're looking in there, we're looking for the decision maker. We always want the decision maker, but sometimes that's hard to determine. So when I'm curating a list for customers or for my own internal calling campaigns, I also look for somebody who's an influencer, because they can lead me to the decision maker and they can tell me about timing. And many people say, oh, I just, I don't want to have conversations with gatekeepers, but gatekeepers can become tremendous allies, or they can become a source of deep information. Like, even if I get a really cranky gatekeeper on the phone, that they will never talk to you. They hate this, this, and this. They think this, and this is going to happen. So they've basically told me all the objections I have to be prepared to overcome. Then we brainstormed last week, where do we get the leads? And once we have the leads, how do we curate them further? So we curate twice. We curate the biggest pool, and then after we go out and get leads out of that pool and that set of criteria, then we curate them again. So these are the things that we mentioned last week. We talked about getting them from social media. Some of you use LinkedIn. Some of you get inbound leads from your website or from organizations you belong to. Some of you go to trade shows. Some of you actually have speaking engagements. Some of you belong to networking groups. Some people actually use like lead companies. That might be Zoom Info. It might be Apollo. Some we have referrals. Some we have email marketing. And then all of you should have your dream list of prospective clients. I want to talk to you about how you curate at the next level, right? So we have our list of places where we might want to go get information and names of people and their titles and their email addresses and their phone numbers. So how might we need to curate those further? And so I'm going to give you a couple examples, and then I'm going to let you guys talk about what you have run into in these various things. So when we use social media and inbound leads to do calling, let me just share a story with you about a company. I did a campaign for Marcus Buckingham. And I don't know if you guys remember him, but this is the guy that wrote Strength Finders. His name isn't on the book, but he's the guy that worked at Gallup Poll that did that. And so he's an HR consultant and he's super charismatic. And we were calling on them and they wanted us, we had a call list, but we had all these inbound leads. And about day 3, what I found out, I had found the same thing out on his LinkedIn contacts and outreaches and his inbound over his website, was that because he was so charismatic and so popular, I had to get up at 4 in the morning to go through those and figure out which ones of these do we add to our list that we're going to call, because half of the people were writing to him, not because they wanted to work with him, but they wanted to work for him. So I had to figure out, how do I call out those inbound leads that aren't for my sales campaign? So I had to go through every morning and pull out everybody that I needed to direct to HR. Then this guy also had like all these groupies, right? Oh my gosh, we read this book and you're so great. And he was that great. I mean, he was worth, following. But then I had to figure out, okay, how can I tune those out of my list, right? And not ignore them or shut them off. So I had to set up a workflow that said, we are so glad you reached out. We love hearing that you agree with us. But so those went to another spot. So I had to narrow it down. Same thing is true for people that visit my LinkedIn profile. So you have to, wherever you're getting your leads, you have to curate them one more time to say, what kind of lead are they? And what am I going to do with that kind of lead? Does anybody here do trade shows or speaking engagements? So I find those have to be curated in the same manner. So I have a client, and I'm going to call them a fancy collection agency, because they collect funds. For example, if a city vehicle has been destroyed or damaged in an accident, and it's not the fault of the city or the utility, we have to track those people down. So they go to trade shows where all of these utilities and the DOTs and all the people come. But what happens is, when they get through, they send me the list. These are all the people that we met at the conference, and we want you to set up calls with them. Well, it took me about one list to figure out who goes to those conferences. Do influencers go to those conferences? Do decision makers go to those conferences? And I found out right away, lots of people go to those conferences because their boss is saying, you've really worked hard and we want to give you the chance to go. Or sometimes the people that come by their booth are coming by their booth because they want to take all those little tchotchkes home to their kids. People have a lot of reasons for coming to hear you speak or for coming to go to a conference. So you have to curate those out. Why am I making such a big deal about curating? Is because time is money. And every day that you say, I'm going to spend an hour doing calling, or I'm going to do, follow up on emails, or I'm going to go out and put something on LinkedIn, you're spending your very precious time. And what you want to do is, you want to be polite to the people that you don't want to pursue at this time. You want to group all of your marketing leads and put them in your marketing chain. And you only want to spend the intense cold calling or follow up or whatever it is you do on the people that really have potential. So you're curating your list because your time is incredibly valuable. If any of you use lead companies, you want to ask yourself the question, where did their leads come from? Are they crowdsourced or do they do real research? What kind of data am I going to get? Am I going to get emails and direct lines, or am I just going to get the main line? So you're curating, even when you're buying a list from the Houston Business Journal or the Boston Business Journal or whatever it is, you're going to curate that list down because your time is important. And I want anybody that needs to hop off to please do so. Thanks for joining us and listening, and thanks for interacting. I really appreciate you guys.